Commander Jake Morrison stared at the massive screen in front of him. The view showed empty space, but his sensors told a different story. Something big was out there, hidden in the darkness between stars. His ship, the EDF Horizon, had been searching this sector for 3 weeks now, following signals that made no sense. "Sir, we're getting those readings again," said Lieutenant Ben Carter from his position at the communications console. His voice carried excitement mixed with worry. "They're stronger now. Whatever's out there, it's huge." Jake nodded and turned to his science officer. "Dr. Campbell, what do you think?" Dr. Lisa Campbell looked up from her instruments. She had been studying space artifacts for 15 years, but nothing had prepared her for this. "The energy signatures are unlike anything we've seen before. They're old, Commander." "Really old? How old?" Jake asked. "Based on the cosmic radiation patterns, I'd say at least 50,000 years, maybe more." The bridge fell silent. 50,000 years ago, humans were just learning to make fire. The idea that something from that time could still be functioning seemed impossible. "Take us closer," Jake ordered. "Keep the shields ready." The horizon moved forward slowly. As they got closer, the darkness began to change. Shapes appeared on the screen, growing larger and more defined. Jake felt his breath catch in his throat. "By the stars," whispered Captain Rick Barnes, Jake's second in command. "Look at the size of those things." The screen now showed a fleet of ships unlike anything in the galactic databases. There were dozens of them, each one massive beyond belief. The smallest ship was 3 times the size of the Horizon. The largest looked like it could swallow a small moon. "They're not moving," reported Navigation Officer Sam Hughes. "No engine signatures, no power readings. They're just drifting." Dr. Campbell was busy scanning the ships with every instrument they had. "The hull composition is strange. It's not matching any known materials in our database, and the design, it's so different from anything we've seen." Jake studied the shapes. On the screen, the ships had smooth curves and flowing lines that seemed almost organic. They didn't look like the angular designs of modern spacecraft. If anything, they looked ancient, like something from a lost civilization. "Commander," Ben Carter called out, "we're getting a transmission from the Galactic Council ship. They want to talk." Jake sighed. The Council had sent their own expedition to investigate the signals. 3 alien species were represented: the Zephyrians with their crystal-like bodies, the Mollusk Collective with their tentacled forms, and the Iron Caste with their mechanical augmentations. "Put them through," Jake said. The screen split to show Ambassador Vexstar of the Zephyrian Empire. His crystalline face reflected the light and patterns that Jake had learned to read as amusement. "Commander Morrison," Vexstar's voice sounded like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. "We see you have found the same debris field we detected. Quite a collection of space junk, wouldn't you say?" "Space junk?" Jake raised an eyebrow. "These ships are enormous, and they're intact." "Intact, yes, but clearly abandoned. Look at them, Commander. Primitive designs, outdated technology. Whatever species built these ships died out long ago, and good thing too. Such crude craftsmanship would be dangerous in modern space." Jake heard several of the other alien representatives laughing through the communication link. To them, these ancient ships were nothing more than relics to be scrapped for materials. "We should investigate them properly," Jake said. "Something this old could teach us about early galactic civilization. Investigate junk?" This came from Commander Zdrix of the Iron Caste, his mechanical voice full of scorn. "These ships are worthless. My scanners show no advanced technology. No weapon systems worth mentioning. They're not even worth the fuel it would take to tow them to a scrapyard." Dr. Campbell looked up from her instruments with a frown. "That's strange." "My readings show the opposite. These ships are giving off energy signatures that suggest very advanced technology." "Your instruments must be malfunctioning," Vexstar said dismissively. "We have scanned these vessels thoroughly. They are primitive at best." Jake felt a growing frustration. The aliens seemed determined to write off the fleet without proper investigation. But something about these ships called to him. They were important. He could feel it. We're going to board one of them, Jake announced. Commander Morrison, Vextara's voice took on a warning tone. That would be most unwise. These ships are ancient and possibly unstable. You could be walking into a death trap. We'll take precautions. Jake replied. Captain Barnes, assemble a boarding party. Full environmental suits and emergency equipment. Yes, sir. Rick Barnes began selecting team members for the mission. As the horizon moved closer to the largest ship in the fleet, Jake could see more details. The hull was covered in symbols and patterns that seemed to shift and change in the light. The metal itself looked different from anything he'd seen before, almost like it was alive. The airlock is unusual, reported engineer Amy Rodriguez, as she prepared the boarding equipment. It's much larger than our standard designs, and the sealing mechanism is completely different, but I think I can get us inside. Good work, Amy, Jake said. What about life support? That's the weird part, sir. The ship is showing signs of active life support systems. After 50,000 years, that should be impossible. Jake felt a chill run down his spine. Active life support meant something might still be alive on those ships, but what could survive for 50,000 years? Commander, Dr. Campbell called out. I'm picking up some interesting readings from the ship's power core. It's still functional, but the energy type is completely unknown. Unknown how? It's not fusion, not antimatter, not any form of power generation we recognize. But it's producing enormous amounts of energy, enough to power a small city. Jake stared at the ancient ship on his screen. Every new piece of information made it more mysterious. The aliens might think these ships were primitive junk, but his instincts told him they were looking at something far more advanced than anyone realized. Boarding party, prepare for departure, Jake ordered. We're going to find out what secrets these ships are hiding. As the Horizon's shuttle bay opened and the boarding craft launched toward the ancient vessel, Jake couldn't shake the feeling that they were about to discover something that would change everything they thought they knew about the galaxy. The alien representatives continued to mock the human expedition over the communication channels, making jokes about treasure hunting and waste collection. But Jake noticed that their ships were keeping their distance, as if they weren't quite as confident as they pretended to be. EDF Horizon to boarding party, Jake said into his communicator. You are cleared for approach. Be careful in there, and report everything you find. Understood, Commander, came Rick Barnes' voice. We're about to dock. Whatever built these ships, they sure knew how to make them big. Jake watched the boarding craft disappear into the shadow of the massive alien vessel. In a few minutes, they would have their first answers about the mysterious fleet. He just hoped they were prepared for whatever they might find inside. The other alien ships continued their mockery, but Jake noticed their sensor arrays were all focused on the boarding operation. Despite their words, they were just as curious as he was about what lay hidden in those ancient halls. Captain Rick Barnes felt his boots touch the deck of the ancient ship with a soft thud. The gravity was working, which surprised him. After 50,000 years, most systems should have failed long ago. But here he was, standing in a corridor that looked like it had been cleaned yesterday. This is incredible, whispered engineer Amy Rodriguez as she stepped through the airlock behind him. The air is breathable. Temperature is perfect. How is this possible? Rick activated his communicator. Commander Morrison, we're inside. The ship's life support is fully functional. No signs of damage or decay. Copy that, Captain, came Jake's voice through the static. What do you see? Rick looked around the corridor. The walls were made of some kind of smooth metal that seemed to glow with its own inner light. Strange symbols covered every surface, carved deep into the metal in patterns that hurt to look at directly. The writing is everywhere, Rick reported. It's not like anything in our databases. Dr. Campbell should see this. I'm patching her through now. Jake replied. Dr. Campbell's voice came through the communicator, excited and breathless. Captain Barnes, can you get clear images of those symbols? I need to analyze them. Already on it, said Technical Sergeant Tony Martinez, who was documenting everything with his recording equipment. But there's something strange about them. They seem to change when I'm not looking directly at them, Rick frowned. What do you mean change? I mean they're different every time I look. Like they're alive or something. The boarding party moved deeper into the ship. The corridors were enormous, built for beings much larger than humans. The ceiling disappeared into darkness above them, and their footsteps echoed in the vast space. "Sir," called out Lieutenant Kate Davis from up ahead, "you need to see this." Rick hurried forward and stopped dead in his tracks. They had entered a massive chamber filled with rows of what looked like sleeping pods. Each pod was the size of a small room, made of the same glowing metal as the walls. There were hundreds of them, maybe thousands. "Are they occupied?" Rick asked. Kate ran her scanner over the nearest pod. "I'm not getting any life signs. But there's definitely something inside. The pods are sealed, and I can't get a clear reading through the hull." Amy Rodriguez was examining the pod's control systems. "The technology is amazing. I can't figure out how any of this works, but it's clearly very advanced. These aren't just sleeping chambers. They're something else entirely." Rick felt a chill run down his spine. Something else like what? I don't know. But the power requirements for these pods are enormous. Each one is using more energy than our entire ship. Back on the horizon, Dr. Campbell was studying the images being transmitted from the boarding party. She had been working for hours, comparing the symbols to every known language in the galactic databases. Nothing matched. "Commander," she called out to Jake. "I think I'm starting to see a pattern in these symbols." "They're not completely random." Jake moved to her station. "What kind of pattern? It's hard to explain." "The symbols seem to be based on mathematical principles that are familiar, but the execution is completely different. It's like someone took our understanding of physics and mathematics and built a language around it. Could they be from an unknown alien species?" Dr. Campbell shook her head. "That's what I thought at first. But there's something about the underlying structure that feels familiar, almost like ... She paused, looking uncertain. "Like what?" "Like a very old form of human language." "But that's impossible. Humans didn't have space travel 50,000 years ago." Jake felt his heart skip a beat. "Are you saying these ships might be human?" "I'm saying the language structure has similarities to ancient human languages. But I need more data to be sure." Meanwhile, the boarding party had found something even more disturbing. In the ship's command center, Lieutenant Ben Carter was trying to interface with the computer systems. The controls were massive, built for hands much larger than human hands. "Captain," Ben called out, "I'm getting some response from the computer core. It's not much, but there's definitely active processing going on." "Can you access any files?" "Not yet. But I'm picking up data streams that look like star charts and something else ... double quote." "What?" Ben's face went pale. "Weapon signatures. This ship is armed, sir, and the weapons are unlike anything in our databases." Rick felt his blood run cold. "How powerful?" "I can't get exact readings, but based on the energy signatures, these weapons could crack a planet." Rick immediately activated his communicator. "Commander Morrison, we have a problem. This ship is armed with weapons that could destroy worlds." There was a long pause before Jake responded. "Are you certain?" "Ben's readings are clear. These aren't just ancient ships, Commander. They're warships. And they're built for a level of conflict we've never seen." On the horizon, the news caused chaos on the bridge. The alien representatives were monitoring the human communications, and their dismissive attitude quickly changed to concern. "Commander Morrison," came Ambassador Vextar's voice, no longer amused, "your team is reporting weapons capabilities that exceed anything in the galactic arsenal. This is most disturbing." "We're just reporting what we're finding," Jake replied. "The ships appear to be derelict. There's no immediate threat." "No immediate threat?" This from Commander Strix of the Iron Cast. "Ships with planet-killing weapons are always a threat. These vessels should be destroyed immediately." "That seems premature," Jake said. "We need to understand what we're dealing with first." Dr. Campbell was still working on the symbols when she made a breakthrough. "Commander, I think I've cracked part of the language." These symbols, they're definitely related to ancient human languages. But they're far more advanced than anything we should have had 50,000 years ago. What are they saying? It's fragmentary, but I can make out references to a journey. A long journey through dark space, and something about guardians. Jake felt pieces of a puzzle starting to come together. Guardians of what? I'm not sure yet. But there are references to something called the Watchers in the Void, and warnings about the hunger that devours stars. The boarding party continued their exploration, finding more mysteries with each room they entered. The ship's engineering section contained technology that seemed to violate known physics. The weapons bays held devices that looked more like works of art than instruments of war. "Captain," Amy Rodriguez called out from the engine room. "You need to see this drive system. It's not using any known form of propulsion." Rick joined her at the massive engine core. The device was beautiful and terrifying at the same time, a collection of spinning rings and glowing crystals that seemed to bend space around them. "How fast could this thing go?" Rick asked. Amy shook her head in amazement. "Based on the energy output, it could cross the galaxy in weeks, maybe days. Our fastest ships take months to travel between sectors." "That's impossible. So is everything else on this ship." "But here it is." Dr. Campbell's voice came through the communicator, filled with excitement and fear. "Captain Barnes, I've translated more of the symbols. These ships, They're not just warships, they're refugee ships. Someone was running from something terrible. Running from what? I'm not sure. But whatever it was powerful enough to force the builders of these ships to abandon their home and flee into deep space." Rick felt a growing sense of unease. Ships this advanced, built by refugees fleeing some cosmic threat, and they had been drifting in space for 50,000 years, waiting. "Commander Morrison," Rick said into his communicator, "we need to evacuate this ship. Now, why? What's wrong?" "Everything about this place is wrong. These ships are too advanced, too well preserved. And I have the feeling we're not just exploring them. I think we're waking them up." As if responding to his words, the ship's lights suddenly grew brighter, and a low humming sound began to echo through the corridors. The ancient vessel was stirring to life after millennia of sleep. The humming sound grew louder as Captain Rick Barnes led his team through the corridors of the ancient ship. The walls were glowing brighter now, and the symbols seemed to pulse with their own rhythm. Something was definitely waking up. "Commander Morrison, we need immediate evacuation," Rick said into his communicator. "This ship is powering up." "Stand by, Captain," came Jake's voice. "Dr. Campbell has made a breakthrough." "She needs 5 more minutes," Rick cursed under his breath. 5 minutes might be too long. The ship was changing around them, systems coming online that had been dormant for thousands of years. On the horizon, Dr. Campbell was working frantically at her station. She had connected the ship's translation computer to the quantum relay network, giving her access to Earth's most advanced language databases. What she found made her hands shake. "Commander," she called out to Jake, "I've cracked the main language structure. These symbols, they're not just similar to ancient human languages. They are ancient human languages, but evolved far beyond anything we have records of." Jake moved to her station. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying these ships were built by humans, but not the humans we know. These are humans from a civilization that existed tens of thousands of years ago, far more advanced than anything we've achieved." The bridge fell silent. The idea that ancient humans had built these incredible ships challenged everything they thought they knew about human history. "That's impossible," Jake said. "Humans were primitive 50,000 years ago, were they?" Dr. Campbell pulled up her translation on the main screen. "Look at this, it's a ship's log. The language is definitely human, but the content She paused, reading the text that appeared on the screen. "What does it say?" "It talks about the Terran Exodus, a great leaving of Earth when something terrible happened. The logs mention a war against entities they call the Void Touched, beings that consumed entire star systems." Jake felt his blood run cold. Consumed star systems? According to these records, the void touched were creatures from outside normal space. They fed on the life energy of planets, turning entire worlds into empty husks. The ancient humans fought them for thousands of years. Dr. Campbell continued reading from the translated logs. This fleet, it's one of many guard fleets left behind to watch for the return of these creatures. The humans who built these ships weren't just refugees, they were guardians. Meanwhile, the boarding party was discovering more evidence of the ship's true nature. In what appeared to be a medical bay, Lieutenant Kate Davis found equipment that seemed to blend technology with biology in ways that shouldn't be possible. "Captain Barnes," she called out. "These aren't just medical facilities, they're modification chambers. Someone was using these to change human beings into something else." Rick joined her at the strange devices. They looked like the sleeping pods they had found earlier, but these were connected to complex machinery that seemed to grow rather than being built. Change them how? Kate ran her scanner over the equipment. "I'm reading genetic material that's partly human and partly something else. It's like they were creating hybrid beings. Humans enhanced with abilities that normal humans don't have." "Enhanced how?" "Faster healing, increased strength, extended lifespans. But there's more. The genetic markers suggest these modified humans could interface directly with the ship's systems. They became part of the ship itself." Rick felt a chill run down his spine. "You mean the crew became the ship?" "In a way, yes. The boundary between human and machine was completely removed." Back on the horizon, Dr. Campbell was translating more logs with growing alarm. "Commander, I'm reading about the final battle against the Void Touched. The ancient humans won, but at a terrible cost. Most of their civilization was destroyed." "What happened to the survivors?" "They spread across the galaxy, leaving behind guard fleets like this one. But they changed themselves first." The logs talk about a transformation process that allowed them to sleep for thousands of years, waiting for the right conditions to wake up. Jake stared at the translation on the screen. "Wake up when? When the Void Touched return and Commander ... Dr. Campbell's voice was barely a whisper. "According to these logs, the conditions for their return are being met right now." The alien representatives had been monitoring the human communications, and their dismissive attitude had completely changed. Ambassador Vexstar-'s voice came through the communication system, filled with fear. "Commander Morrison, your translations cannot be correct. No species could survive for 50,000 years. The evidence is right here," Jake replied. "These ships were built by ancient humans as a defense against something called the Void Touched." "The Void Touched are myths," protested Commander Rix of the Iron Caste. "Old stories told to frighten children." Dr. Campbell looked up from her station with wide eyes. "Commander, you need to hear this. I've found references to the Void Touched. In our own galactic databases, they're not myths. They're real, and they've been mentioned in the ancient records of every major galactic civilization." Jake felt pieces of a cosmic puzzle falling into place. "What do the records say?" "Every few 1,000 years, entire star systems go dark. No explanation, no survivors. The official records blame natural disasters or wars, but the pattern is too consistent. Something has been systematically destroying civilizations across the galaxy. On the ancient ship, the boarding party made a discovery that confirmed their worst fears. In the ship's command center, Lieutenant Ben Carter had finally managed to access the main computer system. What he found made him call for immediate evacuation. "Captain Barnes, we need to leave now. The ship's AI is fully active, and it's been monitoring galactic communications for thousands of years." "What has it been monitoring?" Ben's face was pale as he read the data streaming across the ancient displays. "Everything. Trade routes, population centers, military installations, and it's been tracking something else. Dark matter disturbances in deep space that match the patterns from the Void Touched invasion." Rick activated his communicator. "Commander Morrison, the ship's AI has been watching us, all of us, for thousands of years. Watching for what? For signs that the Void Touched are returning. and according to its analysis, they're already here. The ancient ship systems were now fully online, and the boarding party could feel the deck vibrating beneath their feet. The vessel was preparing for something. Systems that had slept for millennia coming to life with purpose. Dr. Campbell's voice came through the communicator, urgent and frightened. Captain Barnes, I've found the activation protocols. The ship is preparing to wake up its crew. I thought you said the crew was gone. Not gone, transformed. The genetic modifications allowed them to merge with the ship's systems. They've been sleeping inside the ship itself, waiting for the right moment to return. Rick felt the hair on the back of his neck stand up. Return as what? As something more than human. The logs call them the Guardians. Beings who gave up their humanity to become living weapons against the void touched. The ship's lights suddenly blazed with brilliant intensity, and a voice echoed through the corridors. It spoke in the ancient human language, but somehow Rick understood every word. The watch is ending. The enemy stirs in the darkness between stars. The time of awakening has come. Captain, Tony Martinez called out, his voice filled with awe and terror. The other ships in the fleet are powering up too, all of them. Through the ship's viewports, Rick could see the entire ancient fleet coming to life. Ships that had drifted silent for 50,000 years were now blazing with energy, their hulls glowing like miniature suns. Commander Morrison, Rick said. Into his communicator, we need to evacuate immediately. These ships aren't just waking up, they're preparing for war. The ancient voice spoke again, this time in modern galactic standard. Descendants of Earth, you have found us at last. The enemy you do not yet know approaches. We are the shield your ancestors left behind. The time of hiding is over. Jake's voice crackled through the communicator. Captain Barnes, get your team out of there now. The alien fleets are powering weapons. They're going to try to destroy the ancient ships. Rick looked around at his team. They were all staring at him, waiting for orders. Outside, an ancient human fleet was awakening from a sleep that had lasted since before recorded history. And somewhere in the darkness of space, an enemy that devoured stars was stirring. Move, Rick ordered. Everyone back to the shuttle, now. As they ran through the corridors of the ancient ship, Rick couldn't shake the feeling that they had just witnessed the beginning of something that would change the galaxy forever. Captain Rick Barnes and his team raced through the ancient ship's corridors as the vessel hummed with increasing power. The walls were now glowing so brightly that they had to shield their eyes. Behind them, they could hear the sound of massive machinery coming to life after 50,000 years of sleep. Shuttle Bay, this is Barnes, Rick called into his communicator. We need immediate pickup. The ship is fully active. Copy that, Captain, came the pilot's voice. I'm seeing massive energy readings from your location. What's happening in there? Just get us out of here. Rick ordered as they reached the airlock. The team piled into their shuttle and launched from the ancient ship just as its hull began to change. The smooth metal surface was shifting and reshaping itself, revealing weapon ports and defensive systems that had been hidden for millennia on the horizon. Commander Jake Morrison watched the transformation with growing amazement and fear. The entire ancient fleet was changing. Ships that had looked like relics now revealing themselves as the most advanced warships he had ever seen. Dr. Campbell, what are your readings? Jake asked. The energy output is incredible, she replied, her instruments barely able to process the data. Each ship is producing more power than our entire fleet combined. And the weapons... Commander, these ships could destroy our entire task force without breaking a sweat. Jake turned to the communication station. Ben, patch me through to Earth. Command, Priority Alpha. Sir, we're getting interference from the ancient ships. They're broadcasting on all frequencies. What are they saying? Ben adjusted his equipment, and suddenly the bridge filled with a voice that seemed to come from everywhere at once. It spoke in perfect galactic standard, but there was something ancient and terrible about it. Children of Earth, the voice said. We are the Guardians, the last warriors of the Terran Exodus. We have waited in the darkness between stars for your species to grow strong enough to face what comes. Jake found his voice. Who are you? We are what your ancestors became when they chose to sacrifice their humanity to save all life in the galaxy. We are the Watchers, the Shields, the final defense against the void touched. Dr. Campbell was working frantically at her station. Commander, I'm picking up massive disturbances in subspace. Something is coming through hyperspace, and it's huge. How huge? The readings are off the charts. It's like an entire star system is moving through hyperspace toward us. The voice from the ancient ship spoke again. The enemy comes. The void touched have found the gateway worlds that your expanding civilization has opened. They return to finish what they started 50,000 years ago. Ambassador Vexstar-S voice cut through the communication channels, filled with panic. Commander Morrison, our sensors are detecting massive hyperspace disturbances. Something is about to emerge from jump space. Jake felt his heart sink. How many ships? Not ships, came the terrified reply. Something else, something that doesn't match any known configuration? The space around the ancient fleet began to ripple and tear. Hyperspace was opening, but not in the controlled way of normal space travel. This was violent, chaotic, like reality itself was being ripped apart. All ships, defensive positions, Jake ordered. Prepare for unknown hostiles. The first thing to emerge from the torn space was not a ship, but a living nightmare. It looked like a jellyfish made of pure darkness, easily the size of a moon. Its transparent body pulsed with veins of sickly light, and where it touched normal space, stars began to dim. "By the void," whispered Captain Betty Johnson from her position at the tactical station. "What is that thing?" "That," said the voice from the ancient ships, "is a void-touched hunter, a creature that feeds on the life energy of entire planets, and it is only the beginning." More tears appeared in space and more creatures emerged. Some looked like giant spiders made of shadow, others like massive worms that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions at once. Each one was the size of a capital ship, and they moved with purpose toward the gathered fleets. "All ships open fire?" Jake commanded. The human and alien ships launched everything they had at the creatures. Lasers, missiles, plasma cannons, and particle beams lit up the darkness. The weapons struck the creatures and passed right through them as if they were made of smoke. "The attacks are having no effect," reported Betty Johnson. "Our weapons can't touch them. They exist partially outside normal space," explained the ancient voice. "Only weapons designed to strike across dimensional boundaries can harm them." The ancient ships moved forward, their hulls blazing with energy. When they fired, their weapons looked like nothing in the galactic arsenal. Beams of pure light that seemed to bend reality itself struck the creatures, and for the first time, the void touched showed damage. "Impossible," breathed Commander Srix of the Ioncast. "Those weapons are targeting the creatures across multiple dimensions simultaneously." Jake watched in amazement as the ancient ships began their attack. They moved with grace and precision that modern ships couldn't match, their weapons striking targets that existed partially outside normal space, but there were too many creatures, and more kept emerging from the tears in space. The ancient ships were powerful, but they were outnumbered. "Dr. Campbell," Jake called out, "what are you reading from the creatures?" "They're not just attacking randomly," she replied. "They're feeding. Every star system they touch loses energy. They're draining the life from everything around them." The voice from the ancient ship spoke again, this time with urgency. "The void touched seek the core worlds of your civilization. They must not be allowed to reach the populated systems." "What do you need from us?" Jake asked. "Your species carries genetic markers from the original humans. With the right modifications, some of you could interface with our systems, but the process is dangerous." Dr. Campbell looked up from her station. "Commander, I'm reading that the creatures are heading toward the trade routes. If they reach the core worlds, billions will die." Jake made a decision that would change everything. "What kind of modifications?" "The same ones your ancestors underwent. Genetic enhancement that allows direct neural interface with our ships, but the process is irreversible." You would become something more than human, but you would also cease to be fully human. Jake looked around his bridge. His crew was watching him, waiting for his decision. The fate of the galaxy might depend on what he chose in the next few moments. How many people would you need? 12 volunteers from your species could crew one of our ships. Together we might be able to stop the void touched before they reach the inhabited worlds. Lieutenant Kate Davis stepped forward. Sir, I volunteer. So do I, said Captain Rick Barnes as his shuttle docked with the Horizon. One by one, members of Jake's crew stepped forward. They understood what they were being asked to do. They would save the galaxy, but they would lose their humanity in the process. The modification chambers on our ships are still functional, the ancient voice explained. The process takes several hours, but once complete, you will be able to interface directly with our weapon systems. Jake felt the weight of command heavier than ever before. Dr. Campbell, what are the long-term effects? According to the logs, the modified humans can live for thousands of years. They become faster, stronger, smarter. But they also become something else. Something that exists partially outside normal space, like the ships themselves. The creatures were getting closer to the trade routes. Every minute they delayed meant more star systems at risk. Commander, the ancient voice said, you must decide quickly. The void touched are moving toward your core worlds. Once they reach the populated systems, it will be too late. Jake looked at his volunteers. 12 brave souls willing to sacrifice their humanity to save billions of lives. Are you all certain about this? Yes, sir, they replied in unison. Then God help us all, Jake said. Begin the modification process. The ancient ships extended docking tubes to the horizon, and Jake watched as his volunteers walked toward a transformation that would change them forever. The galaxy's fate now rested in their hands. Commander Jake Morrison watched through the viewports as his 12 volunteers disappeared into the ancient ship's modification chambers. The process had begun, and there was no turning back. In a few hours, they would emerge as something beyond human, or they would not emerge at all. Commander, Dr. Campbell called out from her station. The void-touch creatures are moving faster. They'll reach the Kepler trade route in 6 hours. Jake felt the weight of billions of lives pressing down on him. The Kepler route connected dozens of populated worlds. If the creatures reached it, the death toll would be unimaginable. Any word from Earth Command? He asked. Lieutenant Ben Carter shook his head. Still no response. The hyperspace disturbances are interfering with long-range communications. The ancient voice filled the bridge again. Commander Morrison, your people are responding well to the modification process, but we must prepare for what comes next. What? Do you mean the creatures you see are only scouts? Behind them comes the true threat. The void-touched fleet contains entities that can consume entire star systems in hours. Jake felt his blood run cold. How many entities? Thousands, perhaps tens of thousands. Your ancestors fought them for millennia before finding a way to drive them back to the spaces between galaxies. Dr. Campbell looked up from her instruments. Commander, I'm detecting more hyperspace tiers opening. Something much larger is coming through. The space around them began to ripple again, but this time the disturbance was massive. The tiers in reality were hundreds of kilometers wide, and what emerged from them defied description. The first entity looked like a living storm made of darkness and hunger. It was the size of a small planet, with tendrils of shadow that reached across light years. Where it touched normal space, stars began to flicker and die. That, said the ancient voice, is a void-touched harvester. It can drain the life from an entire solar system. Ambassador Vexstar-S panicked voice came through the communication channels. Commander Morrison, our fleets are requesting immediate withdrawal. We cannot fight entities of this size. Withdrawal to where? Jake replied. These things will follow us wherever we go. The alien ships were already backing away from the growing tiers in space. More harvesters were emerging, each one larger than the last. The darkness between them pulsed with malevolent intelligence. The alien fleets are abandoning the field, reported Captain Betty Johnson. It's just us and the ancient ships now. Jake made a decision that surprised even himself. Signal the alien fleets. Tell them they're welcome to run, but this is where humanity makes its stand. Sir? Betty looked confused. Our ancestors fought these things and won. Maybe we don't have their technology, but we have something else. We have the will to fight for our home. The modification chambers on the ancient ship began to open. Jake held his breath as the first figure stepped out. It was Captain Rick Barnes, but transformed. He was taller, stronger, and his eyes glowed with an inner light. When he moved, it was with inhuman grace and speed. Rick? Jake called out through the communicator. I'm still here, Commander, came Rick's voice, but it was different now. Deeper, with harmonics that seemed to come from the ship itself. But I'm also something more. I can feel the ship's systems like they're part of my own body. One by one, the other volunteers emerged from the chambers. Each had been transformed into something beyond human. They moved like dancers, their enhanced bodies perfectly adapted to interface with the ancient technology. The neural links are established, Rick reported. We can control the ship's weapons and defenses directly. It's like the ship is alive and we're its nervous system. Jake watched as his transformed crew took their positions on the ancient ship. Through the connection, he could see what they saw, feel what they felt. The ship's weapon systems came online with power that dwarfed anything in the modern galaxy. Commander, Dr. Campbell called out, the harvesters are moving toward the populated systems. We have maybe 4 hours before they reach the first colony worlds. The ancient ship moved forward, its hull blazing with energy. Rick's voice came through the communicator, but now it was joined by the voices of the other 11 volunteers. They spoke as one, their consciousness merged with the ship's systems. We can see them, the combined voices said. The void touched. They exist across multiple dimensions simultaneously. That's why normal weapons can't touch them. Can you stop them? Jake asked. We can try. But Commander, there are so many of them. Even with all the ancient ships working together, we may not be enough. Jake watched as the transformed humans began their attack. The ancient ship's weapons fired beams of pure energy that struck across dimensional boundaries. The first harvester? They targeted writhed in apparent pain. Its massive form flickering between dimensions but for every harvester they damaged. 2 more emerged from the tiers in space. The void touched were pouring into normal space like water through a broken dam. Dr. Campbell, Jake called out. Is there any way to close those tiers? I'm reading massive energy signatures from the hyperspace disturbances. If we could disrupt them somehow, double quotes, the ancient voice spoke again. There is a way, but it requires a sacrifice that your species may not be willing to make. What kind of sacrifice? The hyperspace tiers are being held open by the harvesters themselves. To close them, we would need to detonate one of our ships inside the largest tier. The dimensional explosion would seal the gateway, but the ship and crew would be lost. Jake felt his heart sink. How many people would that kill? The modified humans aboard that ship would survive in a sense. Their consciousness would become part of the dimensional barrier, holding it closed for eternity. The battle was not going well. Despite their advanced weapons, the ancient ships were being overwhelmed by sheer numbers. More harvesters kept emerging, and the first scout creatures were already approaching the trade routes. Commander, Rick's voice came through the communicator. We're willing to do it. We knew when we volunteered that we might not survive. No, Jake said firmly. There has to be another way. Dr. Campbell suddenly looked up from her station with excitement. Commander, I think I've found something. The ancient logs mention something called the Unity Protocol. What's that? It's a way for all the ancient ships to link their consciousness together. Instead of sacrificing one ship, they combine their power to create a dimensional barrier. The ancient voice responded immediately. The Unity Protocol has not been attempted for 50,000 years. It requires perfect synchronization between all Guardian consciousness. If it fails, all the ships would be lost. Jake looked at the tactical display. The void touched were winning. In a few hours, they would reach the first populated worlds. Billions would die unless something stopped them. "Do it," Jake ordered. "Activate the Unity Protocol." The ancient ships began to move into formation, their hulls glowing brighter than stars. Jake could feel the consciousness of his transformed crew reaching out, connecting with the other Guardian ships across the fleet. "The link is forming," Rick's voice said, now joined by hundreds of other voices. "We can feel them all." The Guardians, who have waited for 50,000 years. The space around the ancient fleet began to change. Reality itself seemed to bend as the Guardian consciousness merged into something greater than the sum of its parts. The ships moved as one, their combined will focused on a single purpose. "Closing the dimensional tiers," the unified voice announced, "sealing the gateway between realities." Jake watched in amazement as the tiers in space began to shrink. The harvesters trapped in normal space writhed and flailed, but without reinforcements, they could be defeated. The battle that followed was brief but decisive. The combined Guardian fleet, their consciousness unified across 50 ships, systematically destroyed every void-touched entity in the system. When it was over, Jake found himself looking at a changed galaxy. The ancient fleet remained, but now it was fully awake and active. Humanity had regained its lost guardians, protectors who would watch over the galaxy for millennia to come. "The watch continues," Rick's voice said, now part of something eternal. "And this time we will not stand alone." Jake smiled, knowing that his species had just reclaimed its birthright as the galaxy's guardians. The laughter of the aliens had been silenced forever.